where you're tuning in from. My name is Will Crane. I'll be running the show here tonight. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself here in just a moment. But glad to have you all here. This NPTE Essentials webinar. Ideally, we'll take probably about 30, 40 minutes to go through the content. I want to have lots of time for questions. And anyway, yeah, as we're getting everybody out of the waiting room and here into the webinar, if you have the chance, go ahead and chat in or type in the chat box where you're tuning in from. It's always fun to see where everyone's coming from. San Diego, San Francisco, Las Vegas, Arizona. Hey, we've got lots of West Coast folks right now. Brazil, yeah, go Rio. Philippines, Lawrence, Kansas, Atlanta, Kentucky, Nashville, Oklahoma, Long Beach. It's always so much fun to see just what a diverse crowd comes together for one of these things. Bowling Green, Kentucky, yes. Hey, there's two of you from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Awesome. Maybe you guys should give each other a high five. Houston, New York, Chicago. Anyway, so glad to have you. I'm tuning in from Idaho. Any of you have ever been to the Bear Lake area of Idaho? High Mountain Valley, lots of fun up here. And yeah, it's truly my pleasure to be here with you tonight. So as we get everyone tuned in and get going here, I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. So my name is Will Crane, physical therapist. I graduated in 2011 from the University of Utah Physical Therapy School with my doctorate in physical therapy. That's what most of you have anyway, DPT. I practice in a rural hospital setting, which gives me the opportunity to have my fingers in a little bit of everything, from inpatient care to nursing home care to wound care to home health care to outpatients to orthopedics, pediatrics, sports sidelines. I mean, you name it. I get to see it. Everything except for the level 1 traumas. They ship those out by Life Flight, the level 1 trauma centers. But generally, we get them when they come back, and I'm in charge of their rehab, one way or the other. So in a rural setting, it's been fun to get to see such a variety of practice. That's been something that's really helped me as I've been taking care of and doing PT final exam, is that I get experience on such a broad level of what do you want to say, practice settings, that it helps me when I'm helping students get ready for the exam. Often I've seen a case like that, or often I've dealt with something that's been in some way related to that. And so in 2012 is when I started PT final exam, just as I guess what would you say, I was trying to help students get through an exam that I thought was rather challenging. And it's been fun to see how it's grown. I never would have guessed what we would have grown to. If you'd asked me then what I would be now, I would never have guessed that I'd be leading just so many students through the exam, getting them through the other side. And really, it's been so much fun. Anyway, so we'll talk a little bit more about PT final exam later. Most of you are here to talk about the NPTE and how to get through it. And so that was a little bit about me. I want to know a little bit about you. So I've got some surveys just brief surveys, just one questions. These are totally anonymous. It just helps them gauge what sort of population we have here with us tonight. And so if you wouldn't mind just clicking in, doing a quick click into the survey boxes here. Where were you trained? Are you trained inside the United States or outside the United States? And I know there's a generous portion of folks who receive their training outside. They come here to the U.S. They receive additional training. And I guess I'm referring to your original physical therapy training. Was it in the U.S. or outside the U.S.? And again, it's totally anonymous. I don't get to see a name associated with it. It just gives me kind of a percentage-wise, 50% this or 50% that. And almost always at these things, I get about 50, maybe 60-40 U.S. trained versus outside or foreign trained. Anyway, so hurry and click in your answer here. Then let's see. I've got another question for you here. And this, again, helps me gauge who I'm talking to. How many attempts have you had on the NPT? A lot of you have had maybe one attempt. You've had one attempt that you failed, and now you're going into your second attempt. A lot of you are preparing for your first attempt. You want to make the best of that. And there are some that have had multiple attempts and are trying to remediate and really get through the exam. Anyway, that's awesome. Hurry and click in your answer there. Just about have everybody with that. And then your final question, this is always my favorite. Oh, I've got the wrong date on there. But what are your feelings going into the exam? Do you feel excited, nervous, freaked out, terrified, numb, ridiculous signs and symptoms? Hurry and click in your answer here, how you feel going into this next exam. While we get everyone into the webinar. Okay, awesome. Okay, sweet. Thank you so much for taking a moment to do that. Really appreciate it. In this session tonight, we have, if I were to say most people here are trained in the United States. Most people are preparing for their first attempt, and most people are feeling rather freaked out. Of course, I could have told you that probably before we started this, but it's fun to see what sort of, what the data says. Because I'm big on data. I'm big on trying to help do the very best thing that gets the most people through. And so, Vijaya, you ask, Will, how was the results for the PTE final exam students for the July test? We had a really, for everyone who was a full participator, attended all the sessions, did all the homework, I had an over 90% pass rate. If you take globally, folks who attended some of the sessions and did some of the homework, about a 75% pass rate all told. Anyway, so really, really good results for the July exam. Anyway, very exciting. Okay, so that's about me, that's about you, and now let's dive in here. I want to make sure that we get lots of really good content here just as quick as we can so I want it to be well worth your while tonight. And again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with me and listen with me as we talk about how to pass the NPTE on your first attempt or on your next attempt or whatever. We want to get you through. So really, this is kind of the outline of what I want to talk about tonight. One, I want to talk about what's on the exam. Then two, I want to talk about how they make the questions of the exam. Then what's the format of the questions, effective study habits, and then about how to make a plan and what should your plan be as you dive into the NPTE. A lot of you are taking it this October coming out. In fact, that's almost categorically, I'd say everyone here is planning on taking the exam in October. Some might be planning January or whatever, but I want to help you make a plan so you can make it through that exam in October. All right, so when it comes to what is on the exam, this is something that when I was a graduate student getting my DPT, I felt like this was never really, no one said this out loud, and so I'm going to say it out loud. There is a content outline for the material that's on the NPTE. Now, I took the exam back in 2011, and they've made a somewhat significant change since then till 2013. They made a change where back in the day, they used to have basically a broad spectrum of topics, and you were tested equally on pretty much every single topic. Now, as of January 2013, that was their last major change. As of 2013, the material is pretty specific to the big three sections. Musculoskeletal, neuromuscular, and cardiopulmonary are the most heavily tested, and then everything else is only minimally tested. And so, honestly, I think 72% of the test comes from the big three: musculoskeletal, neuromuscular, and cardiopulmonary. That means that if you get all of the other questions wrong, the non-systems and other systems questions, you will be very close to passing even if you get all of them wrong, as long as you get all of the musculo, neuro, and cardio questions right. And so with that being said, I guess one of the big things I want to just point out here is that as you study, make sure you're studying proportionally. I've had students in the past who, say for instance, they spend all of their time on modalities, on the non-systems domain. Well, when they spend all of their time on that, they forego or they leave out their studying of the big three. When the non-systems is just such a minor portion of the exam, they find that even though they rock the non-systems, they will have missed out on the larger portion of the exam. And so, again, just something that I did not know existed while I was in school. I want you all to know this does exist. This is called the NPTE Content Outline. And again, the last major change was in January 2013, and it goes through all of the basic categories. It's really quite general. It doesn't give you, very specific, you need to study rotator cuff rehab. Rather, it says musculoskeletal of joints, sort of a thing. It's very general, but it talks about or mentions all of these different categories. So cardiopulmonary, musculoskeletal, neuromuscular are by far the big three. You see that it's almost 150 questions. Out of the 200, almost 150 come just from those ones. And again, that's why I say if you ace all three of those, you don't have to get any of the other questions right. Don't try to do that. That's probably a bad idea, to try to just ace the ones and leave out the other ones. But the other systems, really only about 31 questions there, and only about 25 questions out of the non-systems domain. And again, So I guess my point is study proportionally. As you're going through the test, as you're going through preparation, make sure that most of your time, 75% of your time, is spent on this portion of the exam, the big three, 75% of your time. Now, again, doesn't mean you can leave out the other ones. You should really try to make sure you ace everything. But bottom line, hit those big three. All right, so that's the content outline. And another thing to point out, if those of you who have taken the test before, because I know there's a number of you who have taken it at least once before, a lot of times when you get your score report back, it'll show that you did very poorly in, almost always it's in the non-systems domain or in the other systems domain. There's a lower proportion of questions from the other systems than the non-systems. It may look like you failed them miserably, but really you only missed, maybe half a dozen questions, when really it's only a minor increase would take you up into the passing mark. That's my point. Just because there's not as many questions there. Awesome. So there you go. That is the content outline, and I would highly recommend that everyone spend some time becoming familiar with what's on the content outline, so there are no surprises on test day. That's the big thing. That's what the biggest thing tonight. I want you to not have any surprises on test day. All right. So when it comes to the development of the exam, again, I tell you stories from other students. How can't tell you how many students I've had that have told me, oh, those writers, I can't believe the NPTE writers, I can't believe they'd write a question like that. Who do these people think they are anyway? Well, the truth of the matter is that these people, these item writers, are actually a group of your peers. The FSBPT goes through great lengths to get your PT peers from all over the country and all different practice settings with all different varying levels of practice, from new grads all the way to 35-year veterans. They try to get a huge spectrum of people involved in writing the questions in the exam development, the actual item writing process. Then what happens is that each of those questions that are developed by these volunteer item writers, and once you get through the exam, you can actually volunteer to be an item writer for the NPTE. Once these questions are created, they then go through about 8 different subcommittees as they are edited, scrutinized, and otherwise vetted out to make sure they are appropriate questions, that they are not too difficult. And then what happens even then, after that, is they put them on your exam as a pre-test item. So every student who takes the NPTE, there are 250 questions, but only 200 of them are graded. That's what the 50 pre-test items are. And they do 10 per section, so there's 5 sections on the NPTE. In each section, you can count on 10 of them being pre-test items, ones that are not scored, but they put them on there as if they were actual items, so that you approach them as if you were in a high-stakes environment, and then they can analyze those questions for their psychometric properties. Basically, they want to see a person who passes the test, do they get these questions right? And a person who fails the test, do they get these questions wrong? And that's what they use. It's called item response theory. They have a number of what do you want to say, pretty elite statisticians on their team that make sure that each item has the appropriate psychometric properties to make sure that it is reflective of what they're trying to test. Of the ideal student that passes the exam would get these questions wrong. The ones that that fail don't get these questions right. I hope that makes some sense. It's called item response theory. Anyway, they go through, it takes about 2 years for an item to be written, talking about one question. It takes about 2 years for that question to make it through all the subcommittees until it appears on your exam. And then each question is written or is used only about one time. All right, so on the NPT, as I said, there's 250 questions total. 200 of them are tested or actual items. 50 of them are pre-test, not graded items. There are 5 different sections on the exam. Each one is approximately, they give you 5 hours to do 250 questions. So that means approximately 50 questions per hour, which totals out to about 72 seconds per question. So 250 questions into 5 sections. Each section takes about 1 hour, and so therefore 72 seconds per item. On any given test day, this is something that blew my mind. I went and attended some of their NPTE item writing training at their headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. It was a great, 3-day conference about a year ago. I went to, got to meet some of the people that are behind the scenes, and they work really hard to make sure that it's a tough but fair test. They spend a lot of time doing that. But on any given test day, they have at least somewhere around 5 or 10 different forms of the exam. So if you were to go to a testing center and with another PT student and you were sitting right next to each other, you two would be taking totally 100% different exams. And they work very hard to make sure that people taking the exams at the same time in the same place are taking different tests. They want to make sure that it's very, very, very fair, and that they want to eliminate cheating in every way possible. All right, so now here's, it's some people, I tease people that it's like passing the NPTE is like winning a basketball game. You just have to score more points than the other team, right? You just have to score 600 out of 800 on their scale scoring system in order to pass. Now, a 600 out of 800 is approximately 75%. But they use that scaling model because there are 5 to 10 different versions of the exam at any one time. They want to make sure that the individual differences between each of those exam forms is accounted for, and so therefore they scale it. And they don't disclose a lot about the specific mathematics behind their scale score, but in essence, they use that item response theory to come to this basically 75% model, that if you can get at least 75% of the questions right, that you have passed the exam. And that does vary just a little bit. I've seen different, and this is based on the exam feedback reports that the students get, and they show me that their feedback report will show sometimes you only need about 68% correct in order to pass, but sometimes you need a full 75 to pass. Again, bottom line is they try to, titrate it so that it's 600 out of 800 on every single form would be the same. So that any student could go and get 600 out of 800. If they got it on one, they could get it on the other. Long explanation to the 600 score, but in essence, you have to get about a 600. Well, you have to get 600, which is about 75%. Awesome. So anyway, that's the lowdown on how they score the exam, what you have to get, kind of the basics. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. You do get a break when you're taking the exam. Just as a note, you have to go to a Prometric testing center. You have to schedule your session with the Prometric center. Then you get a scheduled break after section 2. So you have section 1, then section 2. Then after each section, it closes up and you cannot return to that section. So you go through section 1, and then section 2, and then you have the option to take a scheduled break. You don't have to if you don't want to, but a scheduled break is where the time stops. You can stand up, go to the bathroom, go eat some yogurt, whatever. Come back in, and you can start section 3 after that, and the clock resumes as soon as you start section 3. You have 15 minutes total. And so if you go beyond 15 minutes, the clock will start up again without you. If you do need a break between each section, you can take a break between each section. If your bladder is exploding and you have to hit the bathroom, you can take a break between any of the other sections, but just recognize that that time is deducted from your test time, and so therefore be very fast. If you have to take an unscheduled break, just be fast. Very fast. Okay. Let's see. Anil, are all items scored equally? Oh, that's a great question. Glad you brought that up. Yes, every single question is weighted equally, meaning that if it's a musculoskeletal question versus a cardiopulmonary question, they are all the same weight, and so you don't have to pass the individual sections in order to pass the whole test. It's just a global, you have to get about 75% correct of all of the questions. And so, as I said, you could totally bomb one section of the test, but then make up for it on the other sections and still pass the test. Let's see, Geraldine, can you exceed the 15-minute break? Yes, you can, but the clock starts ticking at 15 minutes. And so let's say you choose to take a 30-minute break, or you go and take a nap in the hallway or something. After 15 minutes, the clock starts again, and that is time rolling off of your 5 hours total time. So again, just plan on a 15-minute break. And when I took about a 12-minute break, went out there, in the hallway, got a drink of water, walked up and down the hall, stretched my legs, and then jumped back in. And then as soon as I was ready to go, click start, ready to go again. There are only 250 questions. The 800 is a scaling model, so 250 questions. That's important. I had one student who he thought there was an extra section on the test, and so he blasted through section 5, thinking that he still had more to do. And he guessed on all of section 5, and he got to the end of section 5, and again, you have to close up each section before you can proceed. So he closed up section 5 and ended his exam like an hour early, and he failed the exam. He was very distraught. So that's why it's important to recognize 5 sections, basically 1 hour per piece. Now you could spend, if you wanted to, you could spend 4 hours on section 1, but that would be very unwise to do. But in essence, just plan on about 1 hour per section, more or less. Let's see, the 50 throwaway questions or the 50 pre-test items, there are 10 in each section. So they distribute that equally over 5 sections. There's 10 in each section. Because I've had some people say, oh, I bet section 1 was all the pre-test items and section everything else was the regular questions. No, they distribute those all very equally all throughout. Let's see. Let's see, kind of what's your favorite? Okay. Awesome. Any other questions about the specifics of the exam? How soon do you suggest studying for your first exam? How soon? Ideally, the first day of PT school should be the first day you're studying for the NPTE. But really, the sooner the better. It does depend a little bit on your current level of skill with the material. So for instance, if you're the world expert at musculoskeletal, I don't know, you're a professor somewhere, then perhaps you wouldn't have to study quite so much on that section. But really, this is a high stakes exam that's worth doing right the first time and just crushing it out the first time. All right, and I'm going to talk more about study habits. About the specifics of the exam, any other questions about the specifics of the exam? I had one student, bless her heart, she somehow, you have to go through a metal detector and they have to check your ID and they basically make you sign away the life of your first child in order to walk in there and take the test. This poor girl forgot and had her cell phone in her pocket. And for some reason, she thought it was a good idea to pull it out and use her timer function on the cell phone to help her time the test. Unfortunately, that was not a really good idea. In fact, that was a terrible idea because at that point, they shut down her test. They pulled her out and she was under investigation and she's barred from taking the test for 2 years. I think she was almost barred forever, but she was able to convince the staff that it was not an intentional attempt to cheat. It just looked like it. And so they only barred her for 2 years, which I felt like was very generous. In her case, she'll be able to take the exam sometime in the next couple of years. But anyway, bottom line is comply perfectly with the Prometric Testing Center policies. You have to bring in 2 forms of ID. You have to use your palm print. They have to take pictures of you. Anyway, just take good care that you do everything they tell you. All right, let's see. Moving on, question format. So a lot of people ask me about what is the format of the questions, and unfortunately, there's a lot of rumor or myth that surrounds this, but it's really quite simple. So I want to lay it out for you. Each question on the exam is a standalone question. They don't do the scenarios, or they don't give you a story and then have questions 2, 3, and 4 are in regards to this story, and questions 4, 5, and 6 are in regards to this story. None of that. Each question is a standalone question that has information, and then it has a question: which of the following is the most correct, or the least correct, or is the most awesome? They won't say that, but they should use the word awesome more, I think. Then it has 4 multiple choices, 4 plausible choices that you have to then select from. And the choices, there are only 4 of them, and they do not have any choices that are none of the above, or all of the above, or 1 and 2, or 2 and 3. They don't have anything goofy like that. It's just straight questions. Question, 4 options. Which one is the most correct answer? Now, when they're writing this test, they do very little testing down in the bottom. This is, I'm totally blanking on it. It's Bloom's taxonomy. Thank you very much. Bloom's taxonomy, talking about the different levels of understanding of material. And so they will do very little down here in the understanding or remembering material. They're not going to ask you, what are the 4 muscles of the rotator cuff? They're not going to say anything like that. Rather, they're going to have questions that apply to a specific case. A patient has difficulty reaching overhead. Which of the following interventions would be most likely to improve their ability to reach overhead? You have to take some information, analyze it, and apply it or evaluate it into a specific case. And each of these questions has a clinical twist on it. They try to apply it to a patient. This happens to this person. This happens to this person. What is your next step? Or what would you do to help this person improve their function? Bottom line, they want you to create, analyze, and apply the material and not just memorize. So this comes in handy when you're studying, that if you are just memorizing material, you will likely not do very well on the test. Rather, I tell people that they need to be attempting to master the material. That's my Mastermind study group. We try to master the material so that you are so good at it that you cannot get it wrong. Not that you are barely good enough that you might get it right, but so good that you won't get it wrong. Let's see, Vijaya, will they provide pen and paper in the hall? They provide little scratch pads that are dry erase scratch pads that, in essence, they give you a blank pad with a dry erase marker, and then you have to turn that back in. I believe you can get I think you can get more if you need, but it can't leave the testing center. It has to stay in there, and they have to monitor it the whole time. Again, they don't want any of the material to come out of the testing center. They want it all to stay there. Let's see, and then that brings up a good point. Don't let me forget to talk about what to do on that scratch pad. I've got a little trick for you on the scratch pad. Not much of a trick, but kind of a trick. So remind me when we get to the study habits. All right, and this is something that frustrates so many students. There is only one correct answer on each question, and each question has to have a textbook citation. And so your chances of fighting a question and saying that you were right and they were wrong is very low, because each question requires a textbook citation. You have to have page, paragraph of where the item comes from. And so, anyway, point is, study from the textbooks, because that's where the questions are written from. And that's kind of a segue here. When I was at the FSBPT offices, they have shelves and shelves full of books, just like this. All of your basic core physical therapy textbooks, they have so many of them. And this is only one picture. I think I took 10 pictures. The shelf was just so massive of so many different books. And I've got the full list of their books is here. You can find that. It's pretty easy to find the FSBPT's textbook survey. It lists all of the textbooks that they use to prepare for the NPTE. And those include McGee, O'Sullivan, Kisner, Goodman, Shumway, Cook. Those are probably the biggest, the most common ones. But again, they list all of them here. And they make no secret about it, that it comes from the core physical therapy textbooks. All right, so when it comes to studying, and this is the big thing, let's see, I can't remember who was it that asked a little bit earlier, when is it time to start studying for the exam? Well, the time to start is as soon as you possibly can, just because you want that material to stick in your head, and you don't want to be cramming the day before or the week before. That just causes stress. So the biggest thing, no matter what you do, find a way and create a plan. I guess that's my biggest point here. Whatever you do, have a plan to do it. Do it on purpose, and you will find that your studies are much more fruitful, that you get the material to stick inside your head much easier, rather than going at a half effort. How many times has this happened to you? You get to test week before the test, and you're like, oh yeah, I should probably study for this test. You pull out all your notes, and you realize that there's piles and piles of notes. You don't even know where to start, so you start at the top of the stack and you start working your way through, and you kind of breeze through it, and you don't have enough time to really spend much time on it. You're just kind of looking at it, and you get to the end of your pile of notes, and you realize that you have learned nothing. Totally fruitless way to approach the material. Can't tell you how many times people that have been in my class have said, Will, I feel like this is fruitless. I'm just reading textbooks, but it's not sticking. And so that's why I highly recommend finding an active way to study. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a moment. But one of the best ways to make sure you have, for instance, a good exhaustive list of the topics, that's a good starting point, is I have a free study outline. You can find this on my website, just under the under the resources tab. You can find a free study outline. Basically, the study outline just has all of the topics, about 18 pages worth of topics that are tested on the exam. So once you have all the topics in front of you, it becomes just a checklist in a sense that as you go through the material, like, okay, yes, I know that, or no, I don't know that, put a big star by that. I need to learn that item. And it becomes a prioritized study approach. In fact, I often recommend that folks choose the top 10 worst topics for themselves and begin there. Make a list of 10, put it on the wall, and start working your way through the 10. As you master each of them, you can check it off the list and add on to the next list. All right, let's see. And then another great thing to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but joining my Mastermind study course, I have a course that I go through the material. We have well in excess of 30 some odd, it comes out to about 30 some odd hours of lecture time, in addition to some additional resources like a workbook, a study guide, the homework, and access to coaches and live instructors so you can get your questions answered. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But what's a good way to know if you master the topic? Okay, Sheila, great question. The way you know that you have mastered a topic is if you were to imagine for a moment that I were to call you up on the telephone and say, hey, Sheila, would you mind explaining to me the difference between impingement, what do you want to say, subacromial impingement and rotator cuff tear? And without looking at your notes, could you explain that in your own words to someone who asked? And that's the true assignment. So that's why I tell people to find a willing victim, find someone, close friend, family member, spouse, whatever. Find someone who they can explain things out loud. So once you've had a study session, like let's say you've been in the library for 6 hours, you should be able to close your books, turn your notes over, turn to the person next to you, and explain what you just studied in your own words, and be able to do that again the next day. That's the sign that you mastered the material. And then that manifests itself on the exams. That as you take practice exams and you master the material, again, you will notice that it reflects in your practice exam scores. Let's see, Ramel, and I think you sent me an email about this. Great question. Anyone who's purchased the home study bundle, you can upgrade to the Mastermind study course that I have for just the difference in price. Awesome. Okay, so effective study habits. This includes making sure that you're mapping out your available time. What I mean by that is that be very realistic. If you work all day on Wednesdays all the way till 10 p.m. and then you come home just bushed, you don't have time to study on Wednesdays, and so don't plan on studying on Wednesdays. Rather, you need to plan on your time other days. So on Saturdays, let's say you have 6 hours to study. What I want you to do, I want you to map out your time and then fill in that time with chunks of material. Meaning that those top 10 weak topics, make sure you put that material, plug it into a time. Let's say on Saturday morning you have 6 hours and you can hit 2 or 3 of those topics that you have on your top 10 weakness list. You can attack them. And when you're done, when you close those books, you could then explain it to someone else in your own words what you just studied. And that's what I mean by a prioritized, purposeful plan of attack. All right, we talked about mastering. This is another big thing, high-density study time. When I talk about high-density study time, this means that Facebook is turned off. This means distractions are gone. It means that you are trying to learn the material. And there's a big difference. And I think everyone's had this experience of when you study without purpose, you're just kind of looking through notes and going through the next one, just moving from one pile to the next pile, and you learn absolutely nothing. Versus if you are passionate about a topic or some item. Like a great example is if you're researching a product to purchase on Amazon. Let's say you're on Amazon, you're trying to figure out which computer is the best computer to buy. You spend a lot of time looking through the reviews, you're combing through all the different specs, you're looking at the difference between this one and this one. You have a high focus for the task at hand. That's what we're trying to replicate during your studies. It's having a high focus for what you're trying to do. That's why having little goals for each time you study is critical, because then you can master the material much easier, and that way you don't waste time, because this is something a student told me last year. I think it's just brilliant. The more time you have, the more time you waste. So the October exam, we're still in August, right? That's forever away. But really, it's coming up so fast. We're about 10 weeks away from the exam, 9-10 weeks away from the exam. Again, the more time you have, the more time you waste. So use your time wisely. This is the biggest thing. Let's see. Anil, I have the 2015 Therapy Ed and Score Builders. Do I need the new edition? No, but again, Anil, I recommend most of your studying come from textbooks and not just the review books. The review books are great for just hitting a topic very lightly. But again, if you don't already know the material, it's not enough. That won't be enough to pass the exam. Let's see. Milagros, the Home Study Bundle. Home Study Bundle is just a recorded version of my class that I have. It's less expensive. It's something you complete on your own, but it's something that's a good resource if you don't have time to attend the live sessions, or you don't really need the live sessions. You want just the recorded version of it. You can get it. It's less expensive. Anyway, you can find that on the resources tab of my website as well. Let's see. How much time do you need to prepare, and how many hours a week do you suggest? So it really, again, comes back to what's your current level of knowledge of the material. That will be different. Someone coming straight out of PT school who just had a comprehensive board exam, they need to spend maybe only 2 hours a day versus someone who's 5 years. Let's see this. Last year I had someone who had graduated 17 years before. They graduated in 1999 from PT school. And they passed the exam, by the way. They studied about 8 hours a day, 8 to 10 hours a day for a solid 3 months in order to pass the exam. So you can see there's a spectrum between the ones who need not quite so much and the ones who need an awful lot. So chances are the average is about 2 to 4 hours per day, more or less. Again, it depends on obviously the density of your study time. Are you really being focused and not just checking Facebook every 5 minutes and texting your friends and talking about, I don't know, there's a difference between high density and low density study time. So again, I think most people can accomplish this in 2 to 4 hours a day for about 3 months, and that'll pretty much take them through so they can do really well on the test. Let's see, I heard Rima did about 10 hours a day. Yeah, again, it totally depends on from one side to the other. And there are some people who come out of PT school and bless their hearts, they didn't learn a thing and they have to relearn everything for the exam. Or for instance, I had a couple of classmates. I had a classmate of mine, sharp kid, but he would only learn the material just enough to take the test for that class and then promptly forget it. And so when he got to the end of school, he essentially had not purposely, but he had forgotten the material from years 1 and 2 and most of year 3. And he, again, starting from scratch, basically. Right, so it totally depends. Let's see. How many practice tests do you recommend? Okay, Kushbu, great question about practice tests. Okay, practice tests are a two-edged sword because one, they can be great study tools. They take you through the material and they give you an estimate on how you will do on the exam. The disadvantage of a practice exam is that it will either discourage you or you will take it just for the sake of taking a practice exam, when really each time you take a practice exam, it should be a learning experience. Can't tell you how many times, and I pray that none of you have done this, that let's say they purchase the Score Builders textbook. It has 3 practice exams. They go through it and they purchase it day 1. They're like, okay, I'm going to take a test just to see where I am. So they take exam number 1. They take it. They get a 60% on it. They're discouraged. 60%, that's bad. That's not very good. I'm not going to pass at 60%. And so they spend a couple of days thinking about how they didn't do so well in the test. And about 3 days later, they're like, I wonder what would happen if I took another test. So they take exam number 2. Guess what? They score a 60% on this exam number 2. And then now they're really frustrated. Like, nothing's sticking. This is terrible. I'm not going to make it through. They talk themselves into basically a frenzy. Then on day 5 or 7, like, maybe I'll take exam number 3 and see if I can pass now. And guess what? They get a 60% on that 3rd exam. And the point I'm trying to make is that practice exams should be a time to learn how to take a test and to see what the estimate of your score would be. Once you have done so, and let's say you get a 60% on the first exam you take, the next 2 weeks should be directly focused on studying the material that was in that test, the questions that you got wrong, the questions you had to guess on, the questions that you guessed correct on but still don't understand what's going on, so that when you take exam number 2, practice exam number 2, you are more prepared and it's a better reflection of your progress rather than just taking practice exams for the sake of taking practice exams. So with that being said, I recommend that each person take about 4 to 5 practice exams minimum. I've had some people take as many as 11, and some people take as few as 2, 1 or 2. I'd recommend your average be somewhere around 4 to 5. Let's see. We talked about the top 10 weakness areas. Make sure you have a schedule. Be realistic with your time. Again, the idea that if you don't have time on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, then make sure that you make up for it on the other days. Let's see. Hector, can I suggest the study smart according to 80-20 rule? Mean less study and more score. Mean smart work, right. I think what you're trying to say is generally 80% of the results come from studying 20% of the material, or 80% of the results come from 20% of your effort. And so that's what the high density study time should be, is that you spend time on the most difficult topics, and especially the topics in musculo, cardio, and neuro. Let's see. And Vijaya, great. You mentioned something that I like to talk about. When you're taking practice exams, there's 2 types of errors. There's the careless mistake of not reading the question properly, or how many times does that happen? You just missed the keyword. It was careless. Versus clueless, meaning you don't know what the material is. Now the careless ones you can usually solve by just slowing down or going through the material at a steadier pace. Versus the clueless ones, those are the ones you really need to slow down, spend time understanding the material. And that's what each practice exam should do for you. It should help you understand the material. So that's the big thing. Take a practice exam and then analyze your performance. Biggest thing, analyze the performance. All right, just to touch briefly on this, as of January 2016 of this year, there's now a 6-time lifetime limit on the NPTE. That means you can only take it up to 6 times. I have had a very small handful of students who have taken it, who they exceeded the 6 before January, and so now they needed to take it for a 7th time. And I've had a few who are able to do that. Basically, the state has to appeal for you. Very rare case. Just plan on 1 attempt. That's all it takes, is just 1 attempt to pass the exam, right? Let's see, another one. Some people asking me about what the low score, minimum score requirement. If you have 2 subsequent scores of less than 400, that also disqualifies you. Now, a 400 out of 800 means that you guessed on every single question. I have only ever met 2 people who scored less than 400 even 1 time. And I know there's more, but I've only had a couple who have approached me. And the reason they do that is because they had a problem in the past of people who would go and take the exam for the purpose of memorizing questions and then telling all their friends. So they would just guess on all of them and get a terrible score, but then they would go and sell those questions to other people. Anyway, so that's why they bar people who get less than 400. It means that the statistical likelihood of passing the exam is very, very low. And then the other thing, you can only take 3 out of the past 4 test dates. So that means if you take the exam in January, try again in April, and then try again in July, you have to sit out of the October exam, and you have to wait until the January exam. So basically 3 out of 4. You can only test 3 out of 4. But again, that shouldn't apply to any of you, right? Because you'll pass on first attempt or on the next attempt. Okay, so when it comes to PT final exam, and I know a lot of you are contemplating, maybe have some questions about this, I do have a review course that takes you through the material to help you get ready for the NPTE. And we start that in about 10 days on August 27th. It's, in my opinion, and this is obviously a biased opinion, but I think it's the most awesome course there is available in preparing for the NPTE. And the reason I say that is because we spend a lot of time analyzing questions and case studies. We get you basically in the mindset of how to approach the material for the NPTE. I make you do lots of work. This is 3 years worth of material. There's no way that I could lecture on 3 years worth of material in about 8 weeks. We do our best to get through as much as we can, but I make you do a lot of work when you do so. And really, the bottom line is it comes out with the results. That when you take a review course like mine and you put in the work and you do what's necessary to pass the exam, you pass the exam. And it's been so rewarding for me to work with so many students. I've had thousands of students now. On the enrollment page for the Mastermind study group, you can find that on ptfinalexam.com. Just hover over the enroll tab. I have over 200 customer reviews now. And my wife tells me that if you're on Amazon and you see something with 200 customer reviews, it starts to get kind of legit. You're like, okay, well, if 200 people have reviewed this, then I guess it must mean something. So I've got, I think, 207 customer reviews, not just testimonials. And anyway, you can go. Those are pretty inspiring when you go and read those and you see what people have gone through in order to pass the exam. And anyway, I recommend at the very least go and read those reviews, and they'll be a very inspiring few minutes for you. So that's how you can find my class. Again, we start on August 27th. I hope you will consider joining the class because it's a pretty darn good way to prepare for the NPTE. All right, let's see. Make sure I answer questions. Ramel, any tips on studying until August 27th? August 27th, biggest thing is just between now and then is make a list of your top 10 weak areas and make sure that you start working through that material now. Again, the sooner the better, shoring up your weaknesses so that when you hit the exam, bottom line is the NPT, they're going to test you on it whether you study it or not. Point is get to work studying it now so you'll be ready. Be prepared and be successful. Okay, so as far as your current plan, what you need to do as of today, as of tonight, bottom line is you can grab a free copy of my study outline. That's on the resources tab of my website. Grab a free copy of the outline, make a list of your top 10 worst or top 10 weak topics, and start attacking them from the textbooks. One by one, just attack them with a vengeance with the purpose of making sure that you master the material thereon. Attack them all. Make sure that you're studying proportionately the cardio, the musculo, and the neuro. And then one of the last tips I want to talk about is, so this relates to that little scratch pad they give you in the Prometric Testing Center. This is a great exercise to know whether or not you mastered the concept, and it's a good way to master the concept. Is for any concept that you're trying to prepare for, the idea is to take a broad topic, something that you're learning, and try to summarize it in your own words to be as few words as possible. Now, a lot of you have probably had this experience back in undergraduate or graduate school that you had, say, a statistics class or a chemistry class. This isn't always the case, but some professors would allow you to take one note card into the exam with you. So you could, and this is not the case with the NPT, just so you know. I'm just describing this as a possibility. But in the in this case, an undergraduate, they would allow you to take a little note card in. You could write as many notes as you could fit on that note card. And invariably what would happen, at least this was what I would do and my classmates would do, we'd write in the smallest possible lettering everything we could possibly think of that would be important to know for that test. And so that would be good practice for you. You can't take a card in with you on the test. However, the practice of taking a broad or a large amount of material and summarizing it to fit on a note card is a great way of actively learning the material. Plus, you'll also discover that if you practice that a time or two or three, it becomes that card that you create almost gets memorized because you've spent so much time focusing on, okay, how small do I write it? And I need to draw this diagram right here, and I'm going to write all around it. Again, if you make your little study card a couple of times, it will become to the point where you don't even need the card, which is good because you can't take it with you into the NPT, but it's a good practice of active studying to really get that material to stick inside your head. Get the material to stick inside your head. Let's see. Sarah, hi Will, how many times do we meet per week? We meet 4 times a week. We meet on Saturday mornings and then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings as part of the Mastermind course. Is 2 to 4 hours a day enough time to complete? Again, it depends on your current level of knowledge. It usually is enough, but again, referring to the person who was out for 15 or 17 years, this last year, it was amazing who came out of the woodwork in 2016. Like I had one person who was out for 17 years. I had 3 people who were out for 15 years, a handful that were out for 12 and 10 years. It just took them a long time, and they were able to make it through the exam just with the appropriate amount of time. Let's see. Debbie, if you took the exam before 2016, is it already counted? Yes. Yep. There's no grandfathering. Every attempt you've ever had on the NPTE counts towards that 6. Are there any rules from 2017? There aren't any major changes coming in 2017, at least none that I've heard of. I know that in 2018, they will likely make some minor adjustments to the content outline. At least that's their usual schedule, is every 5 years they revisit the outline. And the last one was in 2013, so the next one is most likely in 2018. Let's see, Sheila, are you talking about a topic? Could you give us an example of a topic that could fit on a note card? Any of the topics. So a great example would be, like, let's say you want to talk about EKG. So on your little note card, to start drawing out what's a first degree heart block, what's a second degree type 1, second degree type 2, and a third degree heart block. Write down what a premature ventricular contraction is, what an inverted T wave signifies, ST segment elevation versus ST segment depression. Try to squeeze all that information onto a little note card, and you'll find that that exercise makes the information stick inside your head. You should do the same thing for slipped capital femoral apophysis versus hip dysplasia versus femur fracture versus L1, L2 neuropathy versus femoral nerve. What do I say? I'm making, just totally drawing things out of the air here. But basically, any topic, you take it and summarize it onto a small card. Let's see, what was your tip on the notepad? Okay, so Madison, once you've spent time summarizing onto your own practice little note cards at home, you've got a whole drawer full of these note cards now that you've made with the material. When you get to the exam and they give you that scratch pad, take 3 minutes at the beginning of your exam and redraw your little scratch or your note card that you've been practicing for months. You can do that as soon as this test starts. I mean, you can't bring it in with you, but once you get in there, you can write it down on that little scratch pad, the dry erase board, write as much as you want. In fact, I've had a lot of students who say that's almost a comfort technique, that as soon as they get there, they write down the range of motions that gave them difficulty. They write down the different type of heart blocks. They write down a few of the drug names and acronyms. They kind of jot down a few of the things before they start the exam. And just by having it there, even though it's memorized and they know it, it gives them a sense of comfort and security. Let's see. Yeah, everything's a mountain time. Rubel, do you do advising if it's the right time to take the exam or need some more time to review? Yes, I help with that. However, I will give a caveat that I don't tell people whether or not to take the exam, because that's such a huge decision and it's an expensive decision. I don't want to tell you, yes, you better take it, or no, you better not. But I can help you talk through some of the key indicators that would help you understand whether or not you're a good candidate and you're ready to go, or whether you're on the border. It could go 50-50, or maybe you should remediate just a little bit more before you go through it. So that is something, again, I don't make the decision for anybody. I leave that up to you. But I do talk about some of the key markers. Let's see, Annie, I will be posting this on my blog, so be sure to check back after that. The TOEFL depends on the state requirements. Each state has some specific requirements for the TOEFL, but yeah, that doesn't apply. Most of you in the class either don't have to do it or don't even know what the TOEFL is. That's a test for English language fluency. But in any case, each state has some specific requirements there. Julie, every topic, do we have to make a flashcard? You don't have to. I mean, you don't have to do anything. My goal is just to help you get the material, to summarize it. And spending time summarizing and really being thoughtful about how to put it on a note card is a great way to get the information to stick. Let's see. Make sure in your course, do you go over the syllabus and homework? Sheila, I don't correct it. I have when you're doing the homework, which I give a lot of homework. It's a huge amount of homework. So there's no way that we can discuss every single item because, heck, homework number 1 covers basically the first year of PT school. And there's just no way in 2 hours I can cover all of that. And so that's why I suggest you get your material from core physical therapy textbooks so you don't need to correct it. Rather, we talk about how to apply that material in a test-taking environment. So you have to know that material. I just help you get it from the understanding and remembering into the applying, evaluating, and creating. Remember, I showed you that chart of Bloom's taxonomy, that on the NPTE, they're trying to have you create and evaluate with the material. Let's see. Vanya, is there a relation with scores on practice tests? Generally, if you're hitting about 70% and above, you're usually pretty close to being ready. If you're above 75%, that's a very strong indicator that you're ready for the exam. If you're below 65%, your chances of passing are relatively low. Now, I've had some people do it, some people who have failed every single practice exam and then passed the NPTE, but I've also had it the other way around where people have passed their practice exams and then failed the NPTE. So again, the higher your practice scores, the better. Above 70 is a pretty good indicator that you're getting on the border there. Everything above 70 is great. Let's see. Rubel, you're looking for study partners in Illinois. Great idea. And maybe when we're done here, I'll leave the chat box open for a few minutes. So if you want to find some study partners, that'd be great. Let's see, but hold off on finding study partners for a few minutes, okay? Is it really necessary to take the PETA exams? Is it necessary? Well, no, it's not absolutely necessary. Like your score does not hinge on whether you took it. However, the PETA exams are great practice. They do cost some money. I think it's, $99. You get 2 exams. One of them is a retired NPTE and the other one is a practice. But they have the same statistical value as the NPTE. And so it's great practice, really great practice. Vijaya, without reading materials, scoring 50%, is that a good sign? It's a sign you got about 50% correct. The biggest question I would have is what's your plan to remediate? Because 50% on practice exams is really pretty good for without reading or studying at all. I mean, that means you understand about 50% you're going to get right. But then the next question is, okay, what are you going to do to get to 75%? So, anyway, always a good question. Let's see. Anil, if we have any doubts, can we call by phone? Usually, so if you're in my class, you can approach me, or I've got a couple other physical therapists that help me as a part of the class so we can serve more people. But yes, usually we ask you to send us an email first, but then yes, we can talk about things over the phone if you need specific help on a specific topic. Let's see. Rubel, are the classes accessible after live classes? Yes, I record every class and post it just in case someone was at a wedding or just in case someone couldn't make it. Or just in case you want to review the session again, I make those available as a part of my course, my live course. You can watch the recordings. Okay, awesome. So that's the plan of attack. We've gone through a lot of material. We've been going for about an hour now. I would strongly suggest that you consider joining the Mastermind study course. Great way to approach the NPTE, and it's just awesome. It's a lot of fun. I get a huge kick out of doing the class. We go through so many different cases, practice questions. Then we go through a lot of material. The material that's tough for students. We just rock it. We have, let's see, let's make sure I have this. We have 25, 30. I think this time around we'll have about 35 live sessions. 25, well, basically 21 of those are scheduled. Then we have about 10 to 12 bonus sessions. In any case, so there'll be somewhere around 30, 35 sessions that we'll have as a part of the class. Again, super awesome. When you compare that to like going to a continuing ed seminar or any other preparation class out there. You just get so much back. It's just, in my opinion, the most awesome one out there. And that's why I made it. So it could be the most awesome one. Let's see. Other questions. Let's see. Any other questions I have? I always have troubles remembering materials in my last exams. Is there a better way to memorize the material? Gagandeep, it's memorizing is good, but mastering it is, again, just that's the way I look at it. It's hard to keep everything stuck inside your head, and that's why I have you practice actively going through the material. And that's what I mean by having assignments, rewriting things in your own words. Close your books and talk to someone about what you just studied and explain it to someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Like, for instance, my wife could probably pass the exam now since I've spent so much time explaining things to her in my own words. And she does feel fairly confident she could pass the exam now because she's fairly well versed in all the material now because I've explained it to her so many times. Let's see. Siddharth, if I bought the PETA last year, will it be the same one? It is the same one. I don't think they're going to change it again until next year. So if you bought it within the last 18 months, it is the same PETA exam. Let's see. Flashcards are great. Romel, where are the instructions? I have to do that manually, so and you already sent me an email about that, so I'll send you a link for that. That should be good. Sarah, what time do we meet for the course? On Saturday mornings, we meet at 7 a.m. We get up bright and early on Saturday mornings. And then on the evening sessions, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we meet in the evening at 6:30 p.m., and those are mountain times. And so if you're in the East Coast, that's 8:30 p.m. If you're on the West Coast, it's 5:30 p.m. Let's see. New and common question. We go through lots of practical, what do you want to say? We go through lots of case studies and practice questions as a part of the course. What about the score weightage? Each question is weighted about the same, Shweta. So I think that's your question. Is one section heavier or weighted heavier? No, each question is worth the same. There's just more questions about musculo. Musculo. Anil, is there any tips for time management in the exam? Yes. As you prepare for the exam on your practice exams, practice taking 5 hours to do a practice exam, or practice taking 72 seconds per item. That's how you practice time management. Practice. Let's see. Rubel, yes, correct. 7 a.m. Mountain Time on Saturdays, 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Awesome. Any other specific questions before we sign off for the night? Okay. Well, I will leave the chat box open for a few minutes just in case you want to find a study partner, chat with someone for a few minutes. I will post this recording on my blog here. It might take a day or two to get all the bugs worked out, but that's my plan. Let's see, Julie, every exam we give full or we can break and give. Julie, with each practice exam, I suggest you take it as if you are taking a real exam. Treat it like it's the real deal, so that when you get to game day, you're ready to go. Let's see. Rubel, what's the difference between the Mastermind Study Group or the Mastermind Study Course and the PT Final Exam Home Study Bundle? The Mastermind Study Course is live. We do that live. You get your questions answered. You can contact instructors. The Home Study Bundle is purely recorded. It's a previous version of the course that I did. This last one is about 3 months old. Last class I did, but it's all recorded. You don't get access to the instructors, but you get access to the material. So, all right. With that, I think we'll sign off. My voice is starting to disappear. This is good for me to get practiced up for next Saturday. That's what I do. Every 3 months, I go through a full class and I'm doing great, and then I take a little break from class, and my voice stops getting used to it, and I have to get used to it. Anyway, so awesome. Check it out, ptfinalexam.com. You can click on the Enroll tab and you see all the details, the syllabus, and look forward to having you in the class. I hope this was great. Hope this was a good resource for you. And just remember to stay positive, work like crazy. You can totally do this. This exam, you can do it. You can totally do it. So with that, we'll sign off, and email me if you have any questions. I'll be sure to, let's see, I'll be there to answer any questions you may have, and prepare well. the October exam's coming faster than we may think, and it'll be awesome. So take care. Have a great evening. Thanks for spending the evening with me, and I will catch you on the flip side.